Who am I?
Richard Kazimer, media veteran.
Why I got in radio is because I'm good with a knife.
Contributor in Perth, Australia.
Our friend Richard Kazimer in the United States.
How are you guys enjoying the 19th century? Is that working out for you? How can you say, I'm not making fun of you as a race, I'm making fun of you as black performers?
I think as a country, Americans are as patriotic as the most rabid UK football hooligan.
Who am I?
Richard S. Kazimer. Oh yes, it's that time again. We'll check in with our friend in the United States, Richard Kazimer. Richard S. Kazimer, Kazimer, if you'd like to be his friend on Facebook. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. How are you doing?
Oh, we're doing fine. What about you?
We officially kick off summer in a couple of days for the Memorial Day holiday, and I have now 5 wild rabbits in my small backyard, so I couldn't be happier.
Well, these things will happen. Have you ever thought about rabbit stew?
My rule is to never own a pet that's larger than your largest roasting pan.
I must admit I am a complete hypocrite in this regard. I can never eat an animal I have met whilst alive. I'm okay if it's presented to me already killed. If I've met it while it's alive, I cannot eat it.
Even fish?
No. I can always eat fish.
There you go.
I can always eat fish. No problems at all eating fish. All right, my friend, something that's always interesting is the topic of pensioners and I suppose what we might call retirement benefits or pension benefits. Pensioners and the fact that they do it pretty tough here has always been an issue. And, of course, one of the reasons why we have pensioners and why we have pensioners doing it tough is because this country was never foresighted enough to have a decent long-term superannuation scheme. And so, therefore, people find themselves, unfortunately, forced to rely on the government for a pension because for years they were told, don't worry about it, we'll pay your pension when you finally retire. Unfortunately, what they didn't tell them was you'd be paid a pittance. What's the situation like in the US as far as pensions are concerned? And generally, what do people do with retirement? I mean, for some strange reason, I'm thinking about the fact that the auto industry was very badly affected by what they said was fairly generous retirement funds.
It's pretty much the same thing here. The United States is certainly the land of the free and the home of the brave, and everybody has an opportunity to achieve the American dream, whatever that is, where African-American can become president. But when it comes to retirement, human equality has nothing to do with financial equity. Now, you either have to plan ahead for your retirement early in your life, or you struggle to make ends meet in your golden years. We do have Social Security benefits. Now, what that is, it's derived from a government tax that's deducted from your salary or your wages every pay period. It's a percentage of the amount that you earn, whether or not you're paid by the week or by the month or whatever. Now, the more you make, the more is deducted up to a maximum limit. And then when you retire, that money is then paid back to you in calculated monthly installments. Now, here, too, the more you've paid in during your lifetime, the more you get in benefits. Now, everybody who is a legal citizen of the United States is issued a Social Security card with a number on it, and that number tracks you for the rest of your life. So that is the only way that you can qualify for Social Security benefits is to be listed in the Social Security system. Now, that Social Security Act was in 1935. That set up the minimum age for receiving full retirement benefits at the age of 65. And then in 1983, there was some amendments passed to increase that age from 65 to 67 over a 20-year period. The earliest a person can start receiving Social Security benefits is at 62, or if you are deemed disabled and cannot work, you can then start collecting your Social Security benefits at that point as well, but then you have less because you've stopped working and you've stopped contributing to it.
One thing you obviously did do was obviously in the early 80s, you started to do what they've now started to do here, and that is to up the ante from 65. And now I know they're talking about people working to 70, and there are in fact bonuses now for people who continue to work beyond 65. But a lot of people, and I don't know if the situation's any different there, a lot of people, as far as I can see, by the time they reach 65, they reckon, you know something, I've had enough of this working lark. I'd actually quite like to be able to go fishing, if you don't mind.
But you can't afford it.
That's right.
There was a time in this country, ideally, you got out of school, you served in the military, you came back home, and you got the job that maybe you had when you were in high school, and then you worked in that job for 30 years, and then you got a pension, you collected Social Security, you may have gotten VA benefits. By that time, your house would have been paid for, and everybody lived in relative comfort. Well, those days have been gone for generations because a lot of people are getting their second or third marriages. They still have mortgages by the time they're 65. And a lot lot of added expenses. The cost of living has gone up. And the reason that the Congress had extended the retirement age was because people were living longer. Men, for example, that reached the age of 65, their lifespan increased 4 years, so that from 65 to 81 now is the average lifespan of somebody who's collecting Social Security. For a woman, it's 84. So that time period from when you retired at 65 to the time you expired and got off the system has expanded. So therefore, what the government has done is bumped up the time where you can retire because, and especially with baby boomers, who are people who were born a few years after World War II, myself included. I mean, I'm 56 years old. There's so many of us that are going to reach 65 all at once that it's going to put a terrible strain on the Social Security system.
Yeah, well, of course, this is one of the problems that they have here, so it's obviously something that isn't unique. And I would imagine that you also have the same situation that we have here, and that is that the current generations are not having as many kids as the past generations did, and what they're worried about here, and I would imagine it's probably the same there, is a shifting in the equilibrium of the workforce versus the retired, and as you've already identified, those people who are retired are living longer.
Living longer, and at a lot of times under the poverty level if all they have left is that Social Security, which is just a mere pittance. That's why I mentioned in the beginning is it's up to you to plan as far in advance as possible about your retirement.
It's interesting that you should raise that. How much do people put away there? Because one of the issues about superannuation is here, and this is something that is often not taken into account. You get somebody who has a divorce. Superannuation is considered a resource within a marriage. So therefore, if you have a divorce, what you end up with is you end up with superannuation getting split quite often. And what that means is effectively it creates two people, certainly in this country, who are not going to have enough money come retirement. Right? That is both the former husband and wife. Simply because you could have been paying into something for a number of years, but something like a divorce could end up in it being split. It reduces the amount of money for each, so at the end of the day they both receive inadequate amounts. Is the issue the same in the United States, or is it a completely different setup there?
You can't fight over Social Security in a divorce settlement. It's yours. It's one person's. If the person dies, that spouse can then get it, but not an ex-spouse.
The superannuation here, Richard, gets split at the time of the divorce. Let's just say you had $250,000 sitting in superannuation. You could then be in the situation where you might have to give as part of the settlement $100,000 of that to your spouse. Now, you're not actually going to be physically putting your hand in your pocket, but the superannuation is going to get split. So suddenly, when you walk away from that, you only have $150,000 where once you had $250,000. And of course, what happens is that means, and especially since it's an exponential thing, that by the time you get to retirement, you're actually going to have significantly less than you would have had that remained intact. It's a factor. It's one of many factors that comes into play. Of course, the fact that we have a superannuation scheme where basically men in pinstripe suits will go and play roulette on the stock market, and if they happen to lose, well, too bad, so does your super fund.
That doesn't happen because both spouses, whether they remain married or not, have their own Social Security benefits, so there is no dividing up of that.
Okay, when it comes to pensioners as a general in the United States, what are some of the greatest issues facing them here? One of the biggest problems, of course, is that pensioners basically receive a pittance. That has always been the basic issue. With the amount of money that is put away, if you've got somebody who's worked in an average job for average wages for most of their working life, are they going to get a reasonable pension paid by the Social Security system at the end in the United States?
Enough to survive on? Probably not. It's going to be tough. And that just goes back to what we were talking about in the beginning, is because the cost of living has gone up. It's based on what you've put in. Now, there's a difference between a pension and Social Security. Social Security is a given. Social Security is something that the government gives you. If you happen to work for a union like the Teamsters, the auto workers, the teachers, even fire police, there is a pension that you may get on top of your Social Security. So Social Security is just for being a working citizen in the United States.
Okay, now explain the pension vis-a-vis, and I know that you mentioned the Auto Workers Union. It was suggested that one of the things that affected the American car industry very badly was the generous pension plans that the car industry has been paying to former workers since the 1970s.
And that is solely because the unions went and fought for it, because the companies were making so much money off of the backs of these workers. It was kind of like profit sharing, so you're going in there and you're being a loyal employee for 25, 30 years.
How did the pension plan work? I mean, obviously it was something that people were paying into. Have you got any idea how it worked and then how it operated once people paid out?
It's being paid paid in by the company, being paid in from union wages, and then it's divvied up after you've retired based on how much you've made over the course. There isn't an average I can give you, but the more time you've put in.
Did people pay a percentage of their wage or salary into a pension fund when they were with these organisations that did it, or...?
Yeah, it's part of your union dues that goes to negotiate. The unions will then go to the companies that have union workers and negotiate this. When it comes to laying people off, that's the first thing the companies hold hostage is the union workers' pensions. There's so much minutia to this. And then you also get into military and veterans benefits. That's what I'm talking about, planning ahead.
Yeah.
Gone are the days where you could live solely on Social Security. But my wife's grandfather recently passed away, and he was in his 90s. Now, here's a gentleman who was a World War II veteran, Pearl Harbor veteran, retired from paper mill. So he had veterans benefits, military benefits, a pension, and Social Security. His house was paid off, and he did quite well in his golden years. Go forward a couple of more generations, those opportunities are no longer available. So modern-day people are looking at IRAs, individual retirement accounts, 401ks, 403bs. These are retirement investment programs that you contribute out of your own paycheck, and or your employer will match whatever you put in. Or the employer just puts it in. If you don't want to contribute at all, the employer can give you $500 a month into this account. And what it is, it's an investment account, and the investment firms holding the paper on this will then invest that money into the stock market, and then hopefully it all works out and that's your retirement.
Overall, the new system, the way it's been set up, and with all these pension plans, which obviously are changing because financial circumstances are changing, overall, are you ever going to see the situation, do you think, in the future where people are once again going to be reasonably comfortable in their retirement, or do you think that there's always going to be this hardship and you can see the hardship growing?
I think what's going to happen is that people are going to be forced to become more savvy and looking out for their future. This is also a political hot-button issue because George W. Bush's infinite wisdom in his last term, which is typical of Republicans, is that he wanted to privatize Social Security. He wanted to get the government out of Social Security and hand this over to Wall Street investors. So all of our money that we've been contributing all of our lives, he was going to put it into Wall Street, and they would invest the nation's Social Security benefits. And we saw what happened on Wall Street.
I was going to say, what a rip-roaring success that would have been. When you talk about your Social Security benefits, what percentage actually comes out of you? Is it a percentage that comes out of your wage or salary?
Yes, it is.
What's the figure?
I think it's like less than 10%. It depends on what you make. It's not a substantial amount. It's stuff that we just take for granted, that there's 3 taxes that are always taken out. So it's stuff that we don't even really look at. It's not like we actually even have an option. If you made less money one week or changed jobs and made less money, that percentage goes down.
Does the percentage go down, or does just the figure go down because the percentage is the same percentage of a lesser amount?
It's the same percentage but a lesser amount. Sorry, I didn't look into it any deeper, but it is one of those necessary evils you just don't look at. You look at your check and you go, wait a minute, where's all my money gone? And then you know that the government took it, but for a good reason. Getting back to politics, the Libertarians, the Teabag Party here, the candidates now that are running in the 2010 and 2012 elections, there are many of them that are advocating abolishing the Social Security system so that people will be stuck without any money when they retire. And again, like we talked about a few weeks ago, these are not vote getters.
Yeah, but of course one of the problems, I suspect, like a lot of things, because it's amazing how many of the same sort of issues are facing. I suspect one of the big fears that lots of people have is how they're actually going to be able to do it as the baby boomer generations retire. And what it seems like is, in your country, like in ours, there has been over a number of generations a lack of planning for all of this, especially since people, as time has gone by, the subsequent generations have had less children than the parents of the baby boomer generations did. And of course now what's happening is the chickens are slowly coming home to roost.
It also goes back to the fact this country doesn't make much anymore where someone could go to work in a factory or like an IBM or someplace like that and put in 30 years and get a gold watch and a nice pension. Those jobs all went overseas, and the majority of American workers are part-time workers. People don't stay at jobs for any length of time. I think you're lucky if you stay at a job for 3 to 5 years over here before changing it.
Same situation here, Richard. As always, thank you very much for that. By the way, as we mentioned before, if you'd like to be Richard's friend on Facebook, Richard S. Kazimer, Kazimer is how you spell his surname, Richard S. Kazimer, if you want to be his friend on Facebook. And we shall have a chat again next week.
All right, brother, go Dockers.